The government's new immigration bill is an absolute shambles, according at least to the Social Democrats. The measures going to Cabinet include restrictions, meaning those granted refugee status won't be allowed to bring immediate family members to Ireland for 3 years. The move is part of wider reform, which is being criticised by the Irish Refugee Council. And Gary Gannon, the Social Democrats' Justice spokesperson, says the bill doesn't address any of the practical challenges faced by the asylum system.
Jim O'Callaghan I've never seen a person fail as upwards as Jim O'Callaghan has been doing. To all intents and purposes, we're told he's doing great. But then when I actually see the outcomes of that, such as this bill we're going to be discussing, it's an absolute shambles. We now have a scenario which we have this new term called legal counselling, whereas previously you'd get access to a barrister, you'd get access to a lawyer. Now it's a legal counsellor. The definition of legal counsellor doesn't exist in Irish law.
Gary Gannon there. Joining me now is Simon Ó Treasaigh, the manager of the Clare Immigrant Support Centre. Simon, good to speak to you again. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning, Alan. Thank you for having me on.
So the Cabinet's considering what's been described as the most significant reform of our asylum laws in the history of the state. From your perspective, how big a shift is this, and is it a positive one?
I think it's going to be quite a big shift in regards to going forward. Whether it's going to be positive, I think in some regards it will be, but I think in a lot of regards it won't be. And to sound a bit like a broken record here, again, my biggest criticism will be is that it's going to try and put everybody into the same box without looking at the context of their individual lives. And again, as I've said before, I understand why they're doing it like this, but the reality of it and the practicality of it is for those people who have to go through the system and for those people who are working on the ground with people in that system, I think it's going to cause a lot of difficulties and stress that I don't think is necessary.
One of the headline changes is much faster processing of asylum applications, 6 months for standard cases and 3 months for accelerated ones. On the ground, Simon, what would faster decisions actually mean for people seeking protection? And would you have a concern, I guess, touching on just what you said there, that if speed could come at the expense of fairness or proper assessment, particularly for vulnerable applicants?
Yes. I would agree that when you have someone who is vulnerable applicants, especially if you have people who are fleeing from countries that are deemed, and I use this in quotation marks, safe, that these fast tracks are going to miss important details. They're not going to take into account the individual situation, rather looking at a blanket thing. For certain instances, for countries that are quite famously having issues at the moment, like Palestine, that's one thing. But if you look at, say, countries like Ghana, which is classified as safe despite issues that are happening in that part of Africa at the moment, and you've got someone who's gay, that's a very, very different situation. And if this fast track system doesn't take into account those kind of issues that can arise for someone who is of the LGBT community, who's fled from Ghana because of very real persecution issues, that despite the fact that the country is deemed it safe, sending that person back is not going to be safe. And that, I think, it needs to be able to breathe in many regards, this new system does. Because if it doesn't, then I think it's going to, I know it's going to just make so much worse for so many people. Another
part of the proposal, Simon, people with no documents from countries with low approval rates or deemed a security risk could be fast-tracked. Do they risk excluding people with genuine protection needs? And what kind of safeguards do you think would need to be in place to ensure that people fully just understand the process and can access legal support, which is important?
Yeah, they absolutely do need to be able to access legal support. And it's something that they used to be able to do was a few years ago, they received legal support whilst they were making their claim. Now, as it is now, then they get legal support after they've put their claim in, and now they might not be able to get it at all. And so, yes, I think some things can very easily be missed in that regard, especially for people whose literary skills might not be the best, even in their own language. And they're coming to a country that they don't know an awful lot about, so they would need that assistance just to help navigate the system itself.
The bill may potentially limit oral hearings for appeals. How important are the oral hearings for asylum seekers, and what impact could restricting them have on the quality and fairness of decisions?
I think, it's one less opportunity for people to make their case. And it depends on the person. Some people will do very well being able to write everything down in point by point. Other people would do better if they're able to verbalise it. So but I think the biggest issue with removing or limiting the amount of oral healings that you can do is it's one less opportunity for people to make their case.
There is strong criticism of one of the other elements that I mentioned at the top, which is that those granted refugee status won't be allowed to bring immediate family members to Ireland for 3 years. I'm just wondering what you think that could mean in human terms for the people that you work with.
In human terms, that I think can be absolutely huge. It is quite well known that a lot of issues that a lot of people who come here is that people who are fleeing as refugees tend to send the most able first. Usually that's the father, and if they then have to wait once they've got the refugee status, which can take at best, and I don't believe it's going to be like this, 6 months, they then have to wait another 3 years to bring their children over or their wife over, who may be living in very dangerous situations. So I think from a human aspect, that is going to cause a lot of distress. And in some cases, I think it will cause very bad news for the people involved.
I'm just wondering as well about the integration aspect in relation to those in that situation who may find themselves having been granted refugee status but having to wait 3 years to bring their immediate family in. I suppose one viewpoint would be that it might make integration easier because you have less familiar faces to rely upon here, so you are kind of forced to go out and mingle and interact with others that you don't know. I suppose the flip side to that, though, Simon, is that if you are part of a family, as you say, coming from a country that where there's a seriously dangerous situation, you might be so traumatised by wondering how they are, how they're doing, if they're still alive, that it's not exactly the right mindset to go out and be chatting to new people.
No, it absolutely isn't, and it's just another layer of stress. You know, if we take Palestine, for instance, just because it's one that's so readily open in people's minds. We know what's happening in Palestine. We know the reports that are coming through. We know the terrible things that are happening over there. And if you've got someone whose family is still in places like Gaza, who then has to wait 3 years to find out if he can bring his family here to get them safe, I think that's going to cause an incredible amount of trauma, an incredible amount of stress, just because, well, you know, it might be a case that they can't get in contact with someone because the power's gone. If there's no power for them to charge their phones or get a message out or anything like that, well, what's that father going to be thinking? You know, what's that husband going to be thinking? What's that brother going to be thinking about what's happened to his people back home that he can all of a sudden no longer get in contact with? And even when he can, he still can't bring them here and get them out of where they're stuck.
We heard Gary Gannon earlier, the Soc Dems justice spokesperson, not exactly mincing his words on this, his party calling the bill an absolute shambles. Would you, and the Irish Refugee Council raising concerns, you've expressed your own concerns, Simon. Would you go that strong? Is it an absolute shambles, or are there elements of it that you either are in favour of, or some of the elements you're not in favour of you think just need slight tweaking?
I don't know if I'd fully describe it as shambles. I certainly agree with the criticism that's coming about from it, but I don't know whether I'd agree with it as shambles. I do think that Minister O'Callaghan is genuinely trying his best, and yes, he is taking a more hardline stance, but he's not trying to be willfully cruel about it. I do think there are issues, and I do think that when it is fully implemented, then I'll be able to say whether it's a shambles or not. I wait and see because until we know what's going on, I do know it is going to make anyone who works with asylum seekers lives and jobs a lot harder. But we'll see how it's going, because the immigration system and the asylum system as it stands does need an overhaul. I don't agree necessarily that this is the right way to go about it, but there may be things that are in there that will be of benefit.
Well, we will watch this space as the legislation measures due to go through Cabinet, and then, of course, the Oireachtas. Simon, always good to have you on these matters. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for having me, Alan. Have a good day.
You too. That's Simon Ó Treasaigh there, manager at Clare Immigrant Support Centre.